everybody. Reporting to you again from the Glamour City, Hollywood.
The problem is, one, it lies in IP enforcement. Second, it lies in consumer awareness and their willingness to check. If you ask any manufacturer, any brand with the most advanced, anti-counterfeit technologies, and something that consumers can verify, all of them will come and tell you that no more than 1% to 2% of their consumers would actually be checking this.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for our show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today I'm joined by Vidyuth Srinivasan, co-founder and CEO of Entrupy. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Scott. Great to be here.
So I'm curious, at a high level, how much is lost for luxury brands when it comes to counterfeits?
Oof. So, there's a wide range of numbers. Some people say around 600 billion to 2 billion. 600 million to 2 billion. Some other brands forecast that this is roughly a $1 trillion problem, because it's not just the brands that are affected; it's everyone up and down the chain, right? It's the manufacturers, it's the government when they lose tax revenue, when they lose jobs. It's the locals who are working in factories who become unemployed. And then, of course, you have the consumers. And of course, any business that operates in the nodes between, like a reseller, maybe a marketplace, maybe a retailer. So it's a pretty multi-layered and multi-nodal problem. And my take is it's definitely in the high hundreds of billions. On an annual basis. It's a ridiculously big problem.
And why do you feel like it's such a chronic issue where it's just difficult to root out?
Well, I wouldn't presume that I'm the one to solve the problem, because I would say the world's civilized society is probably second or third oldest crime. We still find fake coins from the Greek era, and even the Egyptian era. So it's something that has always happened, and it's something that will continue to happen. I think what it is morphed into now is a much more, it's not Joe in his garage sitting and making counterfeits because he wanted to, like in the 90s, if you remember, they had people who were photocopying, dollar bills. It's not that anymore. It's a well-oiled machine. It's basically like the upside down world, in that you have a well-organized distribution pattern. And that's really supply chain and distribution the logistics is really where the counterfeiters are really good. They know how to get things past borders. They know how to manufacture quickly, because timeliness is also kind of important for counterfeiters, because their agenda is to try to sell the most of something that is now currently selling a lot of. So popularity is something that piggyback on, which means it's way bigger than we think. It's way more organized than we think, and it's also innovative.
That's a very interesting way to frame it. It really is. And I think there's something that was your team had mentioned, which is that Gen Zs are less interested in the effect of counterfeiting compared to other generation. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon that we're seeing, where we are seeing a lot more demand for counterfeit products and the acceptance of counterfeit products out in the open market, which wasn't really the case, especially in the high value goods space, like, for luxury goods or things that cost a lot of money. People always want to put in the effort to research and identify, if have the trust that what they have is real. It also could have something to do with societal changes, where people are a lot more younger people are okay with counterfeits, and it's hard to exactly attribute the reasons for it, but I would say that there is a huge prevalence of counterfeit products across most social media nowadays, where it has sort of become acceptable to buy reps, as they call it. That's their definition. And it could also be because of the quality of counterfeits, notwithstanding the hazardous nature of it, for various reasons, which we can get into. The quality of counterfeits have definitely improved from where they were before.
Interesting. Interesting. So let's get to your startup, Entrupy. What exactly is it, and how are you guys specifically fighting counterfeit goods?
Sure. So maybe we should backtrack and I should introduce myself. So my name is Vidyuth Srinivasan. I co-founded Entrupy with my partners way back. We registered the company in 2012 with the idea of trying to find technological solutions for counterfeiting as a problem set, so to speak. And we kind of zeroed in on exactly what we're doing today, which is enabling businesses of various kinds. It could be a manufacturer, retailer, reseller, pawn shop, even governments and police departments and retailers use us. But what we do is we enable on-demand authentication of a physical product. Let's say I'm a pawn shop somewhere in Arkansas. I need to know if the item that someone brought in is legitimate so I can give a loan on it, right? So we provide instant authentication, which is using AI or machine learning to identify the minute differences between real and not real counterfeit product. And if we deem it authentic, they get a certificate and we back that with a financial guarantee. So it's almost, it's a huge amount of downside protection for our customers. And ultimately that certificate is also a delivery of trust, because it's not just, me selling my product saying, hey, no, everything is authentic. It's a third party that's not invested in the transaction that says so. And we do it using machine learning, using and images. So what a customer does is they have a device which we give them, which is basically an iPhone attached to a microscope, and they take photos of different parts of an item, which are essentially microscopic images. It gives us that resolution to provide high levels of accuracy. They take these images, add some metadata, what brand it is, blah, 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 and then they ship that out of the cloud. The cloud is where we have our algos, and we have human eyes looking at the algos decisions. And if both deem it to be correct, they get a certificate, and that's how it moves on. So it is a trust and certification platform is what we're building.
And help us to understand in terms of the product development and the vetting process over the years. How did you guys go about in terms of vetting that you guys can assure the authenticity of a particular good?
Interesting question. So how we built it was kind of what led us to this point of providing the financial guarantee. So one of the big questions was the industry need, both in retail, on the supply chain side, as well, and manufacturing, as well as in the resale, unregulated secondhand world. We saw that trust was the biggest problem, right? People didn't have that level of trust. And we saw that existing solutions were completely manual. So we said, is there a way we can approach it from a technical standpoint? And we saw machine learning as a means to that end. And this is way back when machine learning was very nascent, right? At least this generation of it. And we saw that it was applicable. So we actually ran a bunch of quick experiments. We identified one brand and we said, hey, why don't we collect data for this brand in this way, and then see if the algos can actually be trained, and if that works. And it worked. It worked really well. So much so that we said, you know what, why don't we just launch it with this one brand, right? And see if there's a need for it. And we got an amazing response. And I'm fortunate to tell you that the customers that we signed up then still work with us. So I think what that really is trying to convey is the technology worked, which enabled us to launch. Then there was a question of how do you scale this technology? And that's the beauty of machine learning, where as long as you're constantly feeding it with new data and better quality data, it's only going to keep improving, which keeps you half a step or a step ahead of counterfeiters, because new counterfeiters are always making new fakes. But on the other hand, from a customer standpoint, the value was very clear. We were helping them save time, save money, and potentially make more money with the certificate, right? So that stickiness, rather, that created a sense of stickiness. And, we today work with many thousands of customers in about 90 different countries. So it has been a journey, but similar to the data, the hard part is getting that solving the cold start problem. How do you get all this data? Why would people trust you? Because none of us were really from anything in this space. We looked at it purely from a problem and solution standpoint, because our mission was always to add trust and reduce counterfeiting. And this just happened to be the vertical we attacked first. But we were lucky in that we found the right partners, we found the right team members as well early on, and we're thankful to be where we are today.
Yeah, I think you bring up an excellent point around product master. So these machine learning systems are going to really rely on not just the volume, but the variety, right? Variety as well as the velocity of the data. So when you think about the different verticals, and luxury is a very broad term, handbags, watches, different types of clothes, there's a lot of cataloging, both current but also historic, especially in the sense of let's say refurbished, or let's say more legacy types of products. So how do you ensure that you have a more or less a kind of a population? What happens if you have a gap in a particular manufacturer or product?
Great question. So you learn this through data, and you learn this through primary research. So we have a knowledge and a research team that's constantly just working on this aspect. They're traveling to different parts of the world. They're trawling different catalogs. They're also looking at the data that we have, because we have millions of items authenticated. So there is data to be gleaned from that as well. So it's that work has to be done. But the beauty of it is once it's done, then it's kind of there for posterity, right? Especially when you look back. And fortunately now we've had enough time and we've invested enough effort and resources in being able to close most of the gaps from all the way from the 1930s and 40s onwards, like almost 100 years worth of data samples, up to the most recent latest launches. The challenge usually is when new products come out, and if they're completely different, how do you get the same level of special access to a new product that, say, only a retailer would? Fortunately for us, we work with retailers. We work with a lot of exclusive high-end sellers. And not only do they submit data samples, but we also have data partnerships from around the world. So the variety of data that we get, and sometimes in some cases, for some periods, we've even had data partnerships with fake sellers. So data is king, and variety is always good. And the sooner you get the variety, the sooner you're able to basically draw the right boundaries between what's fake and real. And sometimes we have been bamboozled ourselves, not so much externally, but internally when we were doing research. As an example, there was one very famous brand that had a new factory open up in some part of Spain in 2001. And we noticed a lot of items coming in from there. And we were like, wow, this is crap quality. How can this be part of that brand? Just visually looking at assessing that data. And then we saw the same pattern we saw different samples from that factory a little later, and we started seeing changes in the quality coming back to standardization. And when we did research, when we spoke to people in the industry, spoke to, artisans, they were like, oh yeah, that's when we had the new factory in that place. And the quality standards weren't really, I think they changed something. They were talking about it, and it was just hearsay, but it was coming from the right places, right? And it also, the data kind of matched up. You could see that the data was different. So a lot of fascinating experiences like that, but data is ultimately what we go by.
Let's talk a little bit about user experience. So my understanding is that there is a kit that gets added to a user's phone that effectively provides a microscopic capability. How has that been embraced? Is that an issue? And as different phone factors and the camera quality, and particularly the ability to zoom in with high fidelity, would that change the form factor and the additional device that you're having to deal with?
So this was always a nightmare scenario for me because, as someone who's building this company, I wanted the ability to sell this to anybody and everybody, right? In the early days. But what we realized was you need, for certain product categories, you definitely do need a certain high resolution. And in the early days, yeah, it was weird even for us to go to, some store or offline or online or to a marketplace and go to them and say, hey, why don't you use this really weird looking device? Which is basically, at that point, I think it was not even it's evolved a lot. At that point, it was like, how should I call it? It was almost like how you have the mortar and pestle? So the form factor was that of a mortar. So you'd hold it up like this and you would basically run it on the surface. And it was really dinky at that point, right? But people still wanted it because they were like, it's still going to add this value. I don't care. As long as I know how to use it and it's relatively simple, I'm willing to use it. So we were surprised ourselves. And it kind of goes back to how important the value that you deliver is. And that was the biggest learning for me, saying that, hey, if this is actually solving a real world pants on fire kind of problem, people are willing to put up with a lot of stuff. Of course, since then we've evolved into an iPod and then an iPhone. And now with sneakers, for example, we don't have any hardware. It's all enabled on the phone. Optionally, yes, there's hardware for like large scale processing or a high volume, high velocity processing. But in general, the default use case is doing it directly on the phone. And that is testament to how optics have changed in the last 6-7 years.
Absolutely.
And moving forward, that is likely going to be the trend.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about business model in a different way. So I think about the metaphor of SSL certificates or use something that's more offline. When you purchase a diamond, usually that diamond is going to be accompanied by a certain certificate of authenticity. Talk to us about that model. And again, you guys are assisting the tool capability for the middleman, but at some point, the manufacturers could also find this valuable in the sense that effectively come as this certificate of authenticity, so that wherever they're purchasing it online or offline, there's an accompaniment that guarantees the authenticity of that product.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's always potential, and we already do some work with brands on various levels. And yes, this is absolutely one of the different use cases where this could be applied to. And we also have another technology that we call fingerprinting, where you can just take a photo of something and identify that this is the exact same photo that we have seen before, the exact same item, right? So it's like essentially like the name. It is fingerprinting of one unique product, no matter how many other millions of units exist of that same product. So when you combine the ability to authenticate and fingerprint, it basically gives you the same kind of concept around the SSL, the lock, right? And our goal is to take this across the market, because it just enables that trust as a standard. And also from a consumer standpoint, it allows consumers over time to understand the life cycle of a product. Where has this been? And all that is just enabled using a single photo of a product that is already in market or product that is yet to be manufactured. So that's where we're headed. That's what the future looks like for us. And our goal is to kind of be like Carfax, provide that kind of value for consumers as well as businesses.
Now, you have different types of paying customers, right? So you got the manufacturers, retailers, and of course those that are experts. Uh,
Mhm.
where are your biggest revenue coming from, and where do you think the next potential growth areas are going to be for you?
So I'd split that in two ways. One is SMB and enterprise. I think we have fairly, like I said, we have thousands and thousands of businesses in 90 countries. SMB, I would say, is a majority, but a slim majority, and enterprise is also kind of slowly catching up. Uh, when it comes to the other dimension that we look at, which is US versus global, we're based in three different geographies. There's New York, um, Bangalore, India. Well, US, Bangalore, India, and Tokyo, Japan. It also works in terms of enabling operations and support for our customers on a global timescale. And the business is also changing because we were largely, I would say, somewhere around 60% US, 40% global a few years ago. And now we're about 45-55. So the split is definitely changing, which also tells us a lot that there is a huge amount of inventory stuck in people's closets on a global level, not just in, developed Western countries, but other places too. And there's a bigger appetite of younger people, as well as, there's just more money in the market. So people are willing to spend it even on secondhand goods. And of course, the acceptability of secondhand, which wasn't so much a thing in the Eastern world before, which is now changing. So we see this market to be getting bigger and bigger, and we see our share of probably SMBs and enterprises to be kind of the same, but the global versus US thing, that's likely to change.
So I want to talk about within the luxury category, Rolex specifically, but then I want to start to also go outside of luxury. But staying with Rolex as an example, we know that for the last several years, it's had a high correlation with Bitcoin. And of course, the charts around the valuation of used Rolex has been off the chart. I mean, you can make the argument that it's had better returns than most individual stocks that are out there. But yet it's tricky, right? Because even if you have computer vision, sometimes the experts actually have to take it apart to get down to truly if it's actually using real authentic components or not. How are you able to do this with computer vision? And then what are the limitations?
Sure. So if we were just an authentication company, then we would just look at, hey, is this real or not, right? But when it comes to the way to approach it is thinking about if it's a certain product category, what are you authenticating? Are you authenticating the form, or what are you validating, so to speak? Is it just a form, or is it form and function? Or is it form and function and provenance? Those, like, what does trust mean in this world, right? In that, for that product category. For bags, sneakers, and a bunch of others like apparel, etc., form is the only thing you really focus on. For watches, you also have to focus on function. Now, can we do all of that manually? Sure, we can. But as a technology authentication company in that particular category, we and anybody else who wants to do this is better off partnering with offline partners like watch repair shops to do the function check, the waterproofing, to see if the case pack's been taken out, some warranty questions and warranty checks, etc. Now, so it's very possible. It's just a little more of a hybrid approach, offline, online. With respect to the vision part, it's not particularly different, because when you do anything related to authentication, you are essentially doing a classification engine, right? And you can configure many different classes. And one of the applications of it is quality control. AI is very well documented in its use for quality control. So in essence, you are using a different way to do the same kind of quality control using vision, except it's a binary choice. Is it real, is it not? Or is one part real, or is one part not? And there are some industry conventions where you talk about, and when I say convention, I mean an unwritten rule, so to speak, where they're like, hey, if a screw is if a screw is counterfeit or out of warranty, then we can't really call this item in warranty, or we can't call this authentic. So because of that, it's possible. It's a little less wieldy, I'd say, but it's very possible. And vision isn't really the stopper here.
So, for the remaining couple of minutes we have, I want to talk about non-luxury categories, whether it's around defense,
Yeah.
let's say guns, right? And there are actually counterfeit guns, for instance, but also things that are more perishables even. So if you go to Africa, there are just basic goods where they cannot actually authenticate the truth and the accuracy of these products. So the question really is, how can this be a business model where it places the burden on the manufacturers, where it effectively there's a small little QR code that's kind of embedded on the labeling. If someone were to scan it, it would then take you to effectively like this SSL certificate that authenticates that it's been authenticated and validated by Entrupy. No matter whether we're talking about pharmaceuticals, perishables, non-perishables, firearms, defense, whatever it is.
Right.
What are your thoughts around that? And how do you treat your business model more like both an insurance product, but also from an IP licensing model?
Yeah, you mean enabling a self-service platform kind of a gig, right? Yeah, it's definitely something we've thought of a lot, and we've also actively done projects outside of the luxury space when it came to things like mushrooms, plastics. There's so many different. I mean, anything that is made is counterfeited. There's fake rice. There's fake eggs. There's just fake everything. So we do see that as an expansion potential. But I think that comes on the back of the certificate that we have becoming more popular, more of a household need and a requirement, and consumers asking for it because it's independent, right? It's unbiased, it's independent, and people are starting to see why that matters. And it's also backed with money. So it makes such a big difference for them to have that trust. But when it comes to problems like the ones that you just stated, it is not just having technology is not going to solve it, because they already do have technology, some basic rudimentary technology. But the problem is, one, it lies in IP enforcement. Second, it lies in consumer awareness and their willingness to check. If you ask any manufacturer, any brand with the most advanced, anti-counterfeit technologies, and something that consumers can verify, all of them will come and tell you that no more than 1% to 2% of their consumers would actually be checking this. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the problem. So until and unless we're very clear to the consumer that, hey, this is not a victimless crime, and you might be unwittingly buying fakes, you might also be wittingly buying fakes, but this is the damage it causes. Let me tell you, give you an example. 100% of every single fake product that I have checked personally with a spectrometer have lead and cadmium on them, paint on the surface. So if you were to wear one of these products, you're basically letting lead and cadmium rub off on you every day. That's not victimless. You are the victim. And with consumables, it's even worse. So people need to understand that, and there needs to be better IP enforcement. And yes, maybe a public-private or a private-private partnership along with the government, where we work as a technology provider. We also invest in marketing and education, the same as the government and the same as the manufacturer. I think then we can get somewhere. And we are doing those efforts. You'll hear about that later this summer.
Very good. My last comment really is around food. And again, I'm intentionally going off tangent, just more to help the listeners think outside of the box, which is in the food category, we have a lot of issues around everything from E. coli to salmonella. And there's been movement for some time, several decades actually, for traceability. So being able to actually be able to say, hey, this came from this farm or this manufacturer or this distribution center. So is there an opportunity, again, this is more hypothetical, but is there an opportunity more from a lobbying or policy, in this case, it would be the FDA, that basically says everything has to have traceability and authenticity. And whether it's Entrupy or somebody else,
right,
you have to have this thing, whether people check it or not, it is a requirement now. What are your thoughts about that, and how could that really increase the adoption as well as enforcement?
Yeah, no, that's a very big and present problem. Again, I think it's multivariate there because it depends on what kind of foodstuffs you're talking about. If it's perishables, things like meat and dairy and things like that, I think it's quite possible because a lot of that is locally made, locally meaning in the US. So bringing that within the ambit of law is possible. I know the EU is actually working on something that is related to product traceability that exists with the product past the retail purchase, right? So they're looking at what they call a product passport. Um, it depends on the economic structure of different regions. In some cases, it's going to be possible and should be happening. In some other cases, it's going to be much harder because if you're importing a lot of your foodstuffs, then how do you make sure you present that? And today, and also what consumers do want. I mean, today as a consumer, you go to the supermarket, you look at the mangoes and the oranges. You say, okay, this is the Ataulfo mango. They put the Mexico flag on it, right? You're not sure, but you kind of know once you taste it that, yeah, this is probably the Mexican mango. Or this is this is the orange from Florida. This is the orange from Costa Rica. So it's also what consumers need and want and they're looking for. That's important too. So I think we tend to ignore that a lot. And there's a lot of conversation about, hey, we are the ones who know best, and we know you might want this, even though you might not. So I think it is absolutely necessary. The other aspect of it, also, which is why I said it's multivariate, is a lot of the technologies that exist today to service that industry in a seamless way. I think they tend to focus on the higher end product, mainly because that's probably the only avenue where the margins are and where the money is. So as technology becomes more commoditized, even the new generation of technologies, including AI, including whatever new things people have, that connects to a blockchain or whatever, that commoditization is yet to happen. And once that does, then we will have easier enablement. And of course, this is happening even to us. We would talk to retailers 4 years ago who were having this problem actively in the supply chain, which is kind of crazy in our world. What people would do is people buy authentic product, they return a fake that's of the same type, and they keep the original and they also keep the refund. And now that fake is in the legitimate supply chain. This is happening with brands, with retailers, anybody. So at that point, we knew this was a problem. They just didn't know how to react to it. Today, people are like, we get brands and retailers come to us all the time saying this is an immediate pants on fire now problem. So we're working to help them out with it. But what I'm really trying to say is the industry has also shifted. The tone has shifted, and people understand the need and value of that trust. In some industries, that's not yet the case. And in some industries, the consumers aren't even aware that there's a trust problem. So to me, I look at everything from that prism, and that evolution of the need for a certain amount of trust is happening slowly, but very surely.
All right, so that's a terrific note to wrap up there. So I have been joined by Vidyuth Srinivasan, CEO of Entrupy. Thank you for joining today.
Thanks a lot.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.